All right. Well, first off, because we'll do that in two parts. Game Master has absolute authority. It's his game. It's your game. You control everything about it. The whole concept that a GM is dependent on anything is not. It's his game. That being said, the game is, and if you want to get, it's a social contract. Breaking it down, it's players are sitting down, accepting that this is the game that the game master is running. This is what we're agreeing to play. Um, as I answered before, if you sit down to play a game of Risk with friends, and then one of them demands to use Monopoly Dog and wants to buy countries and build hotels to charge rent for the troops that are staying there, that doesn't work. If I'm running D&D, you're sitting down to play D&D. So I expect you to have accepted that and not asked to play a Jedi. That's not D&D. No, that's not saying a GM can't make custom classes and do stuff like that. That's fine, but GM has absolute authority. Period. There's no question about that. Now, the answer to the second one is, does that mean the players have no authority? No. Players have absolute authority as well. They have absolute authority over their characters. But again, as I said, railroading doesn't work either way. So players need to be flexible with characters. If you have a character concept, and you want your character to be, and I did this. I've done this. I played a character in a friend of mine's game, Crisis, where he was a cocky ass. He was a swordsman, and he was a cocky ass SOB. He really was. And I played him that way. And I didn't care if his die roll sucked or not. But I tend to have a lot of luck with dice, and when it came to whenever I had to actually kind of like prove it in game, I got really fortunate with rolls and was able to do so. Or at least they made the appearance that he was this badass swordsman. He was a level 1 character. Come on, he's no. But again, it's concept. But then again, that character, I played a ranger who had his arm lopped off once at first level. Okay, so he pushed on. He stayed a ranger, hung up the bow, and pushed forward. So you have absolute control over your characters, but don't railroad yourself into a non-flexible game piece. Because if that's what you're doing, then go pick a path book, because that's the same effect, or play a board game. There's lots of them that accomplish that. There's another friend of mine, Terry. He runs a Pathfinder game, and this is going to lead into one of your questions later too. But he just recently was telling me this. There was a week where he had the game had no combat in it, and it was all role playing, and everybody at the table but one person loved it. And this one player's like, no, my character is made for killing things. It's made for combat. That's what I want to do. That's what I should be doing. We shouldn't be doing no combat. There should be combat all the time. Yet, that same person, when told to, well, why don't you play games like Descent or Wrath of a Shard or something like that, those games suck. Those games are designed specifically for that. That's just somebody being difficult. So yes, players do have authority, but their authority is over their character. But then again, be flexible, be malleable, have fun with the character. I talked about Glenn. Glenn had a perfect example of that. He had a character he played that was extremely vain. He was an arrogant ass. And then the character suffered an event where his entire face was basically ripped off. And he became very humble after that. But rather than saying, no, my character's done, Glenn played through it. The character was depressed. Then the character got through the depression. He was angry. He went through denial. He went through depression, and then he eventually, he accepted it. He went right through the stages, and Glenn played him through it, and it became a very, very memorable character after that, and because of that.
Um, that's pretty interesting. And I can see where that's coming from in a sense that a player owns his character, which is 100% true. That's what they spend their time constructing. And as a GM, you spend your time constructing the world around that character. The social events, the adventures, the rewards, the monsters, so on and so forth. And, I do agree that you have ultimately all the authority. If you don't want a character to do something, or if you've created something that you can't have broken down, ultimately it's your final call if you want to let them break it or not. So, yes, the GM ultimately is the final rule. You're the final call. But at the same time, having ownership of character is one thing, but I think that within the game that they're playing, they have to have a little bit of ownership in the world around them as well. I guess part of this has to do with social reputation in game. It's connecting that character to other people around them in a sense that they can form real life relationships with other NPCs in who they normally see as static or unchangeable. So drawing them in and showing that their actions actually affect the world around them gives them a sense of, I guess, what I would call ownership, in a sense that they can change that town. They can change these people's lives, and that will be continuous as the game goes on. Theoretically speaking, the Dungeon Master has all the authority. But do I believe that that is an effective way to run your game? Not necessarily. Kind of like a classroom, I treat my games kind of like a teacher-student type thing, as to where the Dungeon Master kind of, holds what happens and what doesn't happen. He has the ultimate say in where you go and what you do. But in that sense, I think the players need to have some form of power to make their own decisions. If you push them to do everything, then the rewards aren't going to be as satisfying if they didn't accomplish those goals themselves. You can lead a horse to water, but by no means would I ever kick my players in and force them to drink it. Sometimes they don't want to do what you want them to do. And this goes back to my first question when I came into my first GM experience, where I was ready. I was like, all right, we're going to do this, 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 and this. And they were like, no, we're going to go do that instead. And you kind of have to go with them to do that. And then maybe when they're done, you can reintroduce them to this, 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 and this, and hopefully they'll go that direction. But I think freedom of choice is really ultimately what matters. And as a GM, you always have to have a backup plan, because if point A doesn't work, they might go to point C. So you better be prepared to take them there.
See, I disagree, obviously. In part, it's in the definition. I have absolute authority over my game. What I say goes. If I say when you cast a fireball, it heals instead of does damage, that's the rule of the game world. And too bad. But that doesn't mean I'm making your character use that. There's a difference in authority. Defining authority over the game, I have authority over the game. But that doesn't mean I'm going to tell you what your characters are going to do. That's not what we're sitting down here to do. When I go to run a game, I'm running a game. You're playing in a game world that I'm running. I don't run your characters. You run your characters. If a GM is running his characters, that's not an authority issue. That's a control issue. And I've seen how that plays out. It doesn't. I've seen people try that. It doesn't work. You're right, that would fall apart in a heartbeat. But that's not what a role-playing game is. That's not what you're sitting down to do. So I think it's a definition issue there. And in that same point, a player cannot say, well, this is how this works in this world. No, it doesn't. It's my game. It's my world. I say how it works. That's the part you accept when you sit down to play. You can't. That's the social contract. You've accepted that I am going to create the game world. I'm going to tell you what the rules of that world are, and you're going to play within those. It's no different than if you pick up a video game. You don't start playing Elder Scrolls and then decide that my character. I disagree with this. My character should be carrying around a fusion blaster out of Star Trek, and yeah, good luck with that. It should have about the same effect if someone tried to do it at a table in a role playing game. So I disagree with him, but I don't. I disagree with his definition of authority.